everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today, America basically in the very early 1800s thinks we're invincible because we had already defeated England in the Revolutionary War, and we try to pick a fight with everybody because we think we're unbeatable. We pick a fight with England again, and it goes very differently than the Revolutionary War. Cool. Let's just go ahead and get started. The best place to start at today is we're around 1808, 1809, 1810, 1811. And we're going to talk a little bit here to start with about the treatment of Native Americans. Hopefully, if you've had any of my other courses, we have talked about this quite in depth. About the treatment of Native Americans. It was just been horrific by colonizers, by Europeans, and then once America becomes their own country, it's really no different. Land just gets taken from Native Americans in order to give to, it was colonists and now it's Americans. All right, so let's start with the Treaty of Greenville. So the Treaty of Greenville, all right, is no different than a lot of other treaties that the United States government has made with Native Americans over time. It's basically, hey, Native Americans, we want your lands. And Native Americans like, we don't really want to move. And then the United States shows up and says, you're going to give us your land or we're going to shoot you. Sign here saying you have chosen to give up your land or we're going to use military force against you. All right. So this is a painting of the actual Treaty of Greenville, which is one of the more widespread abuses of American power against indigenous people. So what the United States government would do is they would go to each individual tribe and force them, because the United States has one central military, and force them to sign these treaties in which they are forced to move on the other side of a river or push them further west, so that their lands can be used for white people, for Americans, for colonists, depending on the time period. But then as soon as that land filled up, they would just go force the Indians to move further by forcing them to sign a treaty in which they really didn't want to sign it, but they couldn't stand up to the military power of the United States military that was one cohesive unit when they're just individual tribes. This had been taking place for quite a while, really since colonizers showed up in the New World. Story changes a little bit here today in 1811 with a new person we're going to start talking about. He'd been around for a little bit at the time. This is an Indian named Tecumseh, all right, or Tecumseh, depending on your pronunciation of it. Tecumseh, what he does is he says the reason that Native Americans keep getting pushed off their land is because they're not unified. If all the Native American tribes came together and created one cohesive group, this wouldn't happen anymore, all right? So, getting tired of being put on reservations, he goes around to each individual tribe and says, hey, if we all join together, we would make one big Indian army. The United States government can't push us out because we also have a legitimate military. So Tecumseh realizes diplomacy and all this other stuff has not been effective. You have to fight back with military power. And there's enough Native Americans to create a military if they will all join together. So Tecumseh, to stop this land stealing process that has been happening for a long time, travels around to all the different tribes and convinces them to send all their warriors to one location. And these are a lot of tribes that had not previously gotten along. He encourages them all to send all of their best warriors to a central location, which is going to be called Prophetstown. Now, the reason it's called Prophetstown is because Tecumseh has a brother. His brother's name is the Prophet, not Prophet, the Prophet. So all of the soldiers are supposed to go to this town that is created by Tecumseh's brother, the Prophet, called Prophetstown. And this is exactly what happens. All the Native Americans in these surrounding areas go and start creating a military here in Prophetstown so they can stand up to the United States military. And this is, you can see here on the map, this is in Indiana. All right, so Prophetstown, you can see it there at the top of the map. That is in what is present day called Indiana. All right, and there's a town filled with warriors that are trained to be a fighting force against the United States military. All right, so the question here is, why did Tecumseh want to fight against America using military force? So we talked about it, but keep in mind, how did it go when they weren't using military force? Why does Tecumseh think it has come time to fight back with the military? So pause me, answer that completely, and we'll move on. So this might seem random. Like, okay, Mr. Wagstaff, we've been talking about Thomas Jefferson, we've been talking about all this, like, and now we're talking about Native Americans. Are we just like off on our own little rabbit hole? This lesson is actually going to tie everything together. We've been talking about this whole unit, including Jay's Treaty. Jay's Treaty. Yeah, that really pointless one, in which said that England wasn't going to stop America from expanding, but they're going to keep taking our ships. This is when George Washington was the president. All right? Even that plays a pivotal role here in the story. So stay with me, because it's really cool. So there is a leader of Indiana, he's the governor of Indiana. All right? His name is William Henry Harrison. It's a famous person. Spoiler alert, he's eventually going to become the president of the United States for a very short amount of time. That's a whole nother story. But at the time, he's the governor, all right, of Indiana. He realizes there's this Indian army being created in his state. And he's like, nah, not having this happen. So William Henry Harrison leads the state militia out to Prophetstown in the middle of the night, and he is going to sneak attack Prophetstown and kill everybody that is there. Like, whoa, that got dark fast. Yeah, it was brutal back in the day. Human nature. Anyway, that's a whole other psychology thing of how dark human nature can. Yeah, they didn't like this idea that there's an Indian army that could stand up to the military, so they're just going to go slaughter them all and sneak attack them in the middle of the night. This was not uncommon, as horrible as that is, that Americans show up and just slaughter a whole bunch of people in the middle of the night so they're no longer a threat. When these battles happen between Native Americans and the United States military forces, it's always a one-sided defeat, because the United States military has modern weapons and Native Americans use a lot of traditional weapons, bows and arrows, tomahawks, things like that can't stand up to modern firepower. So, at Prophetstown, the soldiers sneak up in the middle of the night. They attack these men when they're sleeping in the middle of the night, and a battle ensues. What's interesting, though, is this battle doesn't go as expected. This is a painting of this battle, which has become famously known as the Battle of Tippecanoe. William Henry Harrison ends up winning, and they kill all the Native Americans that are here. But William Henry Harrison and the Americans lose a bunch of men as well, which was unexpected. The issue is, the Native Americans weren't using tomahawks and bows and arrows. The Native Americans were using guns. Guns! America doesn't sell Native American guns because they're terrified this is the exact same thing that would happen. So, who in the world would have been selling Indians guns? So after the battle was over, it's called the Battle of Tippecanoe, and it's an absolute slaughter. Tons of people died. The Americans walk in and they start looking at the guns, and they realize on the guns it says, "Made in England." England has been supplying the Indians with guns. Why in the world would England want to give Indians guns? So this would happen. So Indians will fight against the Americans. See, the bigger America gets, like after the Louisiana Purchase, the bigger America gets, the more powerful America gets. England is like, ruh-roh, we don't want America to get any bigger. So to try to stop America from expanding, they give the Native Americans guns to try to stop America from spreading further west. That causes a huge issue. But first, the question here is, why was the Battle of Tippecanoe closer than usual? Why was it more competitive? Why was it a closer battle than typical battles between Native Americans and Americans? And who was supplying the Indians with weapons? So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. All right. It gets ridiculous quick. So America realizes England has been given the Native Americans weapons. That in itself is a jerk move in our mind. Here's what makes it worse. We have an actual treaty with England in which they say they won't stop us from expanding. They are literally stopping us from expanding by giving the Indians weapons. We have a treaty that they say they won't do that. You know what the name of that treaty is? Do you remember? The name of that treaty is Jay's Treaty. Remember that really pointless one? That was that little snowball. Now it's a gigantic snowball, and it's very historically significant. Way back in George Washington's time as president, this is 20 years later. 20 years ago when we signed the Jay's Treaty, we tried to get them to stop taking our ships, stop violating our ship's neutrality, stop the impressment of seamen, all right? England's like, nah, we're going to keep taking your ships. But tell you what we'll do. We won't stop you from expanding. We'll bring all our troops home that are here in Indiana at the time. And they did, because they said they won't stop us from expanding. Apparently, they're now trying to stop us from expanding. They broke a treaty. When a country breaks a treaty with another country, that legally, it depends on if war is legal, allows that country to declare war on the other country. England broke their treaty with us, and America is so angry by this. In 1812, America declares war on England. Now, we feel like we've already fought England once, and they caught these hands. You know, it's the Revolutionary War. We beat them. You know, George Washington's the Terminator. He can't be stopped. So we declare war on them again, expecting to beat them up again. Here's the thing: England isn't at war with anybody at this time. They have the most powerful military on earth. And they weren't even paying attention to us, and they just get a letter in the mail saying we've declared war on them. And they're like, cool, fun, all right? We can't even go over to England to fight them. We don't have a navy big, we have 5 ships. We probably have more than that, but we can't go across the Atlantic and fight them. So England, it's like, so y'all declared war? All right. England comes rolling over to the United States, and we're all pounding our chests, yeah, come get some, England. When England shows up, the horizon turns black from their navy, and we're like, ruh-roh, we may have made a mistake here. One of the first things England is going to do is they have to secure our ports in this war, all right? One of the most famous ports, or the most important ports at the time, was Baltimore, in Baltimore, Maryland. So it's a very well defensed port, but they need, for their navy, they need to come in, basically wipe out all the defenses of a port, so they can unload their troops and then start wrecking shop. But they can't do that until they defeat the ports, which means you have to take out the forts that defend the ports. Forts that defend the ports. So the fort that defends Baltimore is Fort Mchenry. All right. So Fort Mchenry, very powerful fort, has all its guns facing out towards the sea, and the ships can't come by. The British ships can't come by into the harbor of Baltimore until that fort falls. So the English military shows up in this painting here, or this drawing, whatever this is, and they basically surround as best they can Fort McHenry, and they open fire on it trying to blow it up. This is one of the first battles of the War of 1812. Any normal person is literally going to leave Baltimore because you're in the middle of a war zone But not this guy, Francis Scott Key. Francis Scott Key goes and gets a hotel room with a balcony view that overlooks this battle. All right. So Francis Scott Key is watching this and watching Fort McHenry get the crap beat out of it. All right. And he's like, oh, dang, this ain't good for us. So there's no radios or anything at the time. The way that you know that a fort has fallen is that they raise a white flag saying, don't hit me no more. All right. So a fort otherwise is going to be flying their country's flag. Fort McHenry is flying the American flag. All right. While Fort McHenry is just getting slobbered or clobbered here, they continue to fly the American flag saying, we're not quitting. Even though their defenses are getting wiped out, even though their guns are getting wiped out, they're continuing to fight this clearly losing battle. It becomes nighttime. You can't really see what's going on. Francis Scott Key, this guy who's come to watch this, he goes to bed in his hotel room. And like all night, he keeps hearing like the bombs go off, which he thinks is a jerk move because clearly this fort has given up. Like, why are you kicking it while it's down? He wakes up in the morning and goes out there, and Fort McHenry just like a rubble at this time. But he realizes the reason that the ships keep firing on Fort McHenry is Fort McHenry has not surrendered. That it's still flying the American flag. Like, they clearly are going to lose this. But the courageousness in his mind of what he's seeing Fort McHenry do, he sits down and writes a poem about it, because that's what you do in the middle of a war zone is you write poems. And it's called the Star-Spangled Banner, which is our national anthem. Bombs bursting in air all through the night, home of the brave, land of the free. What that our national anthem is actually saying is we're not losing as fast as you thought we were. All right. The national anthem is not actually we're winning. It's just like you can keep punching us in the face and we won't get knocked out. That is what our national anthem is, but it comes directly from the War of 1812 and this poem, which gets turned into a song by Francis Scott Key. As soon as he basically writes his poem, Fort McHenry surrenders, they fly the white flag, and the British Navy comes right into the Baltimore harbor. They then unload their ships. And they're like, all right, America, you're about to get beat up. And America's like, get some. Like, we refuse to ever acknowledge defeat. Like, all right. So they just start destroying everything. The British do. They come through and just wreck shop up one side and down the other, going up and down the East Coast. When I say they destroy everything, we have no military that can stand up to the British military. I mean, it is an absolute destruction, all right, with the British forces here. They go to the White House. Now, I say the White House because you know what I mean, all right? The big fancy mansion that the president lives in. At the time, it wasn't called the White House. We're like, oh. Well, why did they change the names? Because they had to change the house. What do you mean they had to change the house? Yeah, they had to rebuild the house. Why did they have to rebuild it? Well, young student of mine, because it used to just be called the President's Mansion. And in the War of 1812, it got burnt to the ground by the British military. They showed up and it was like, surrender, and America's like, never! And they're like, we're going to burn down your capital. And we're like, bet you won't do it. And they do it, and they set the President's Mansion on fire, and it burns down. We will eventually rebuild it, make it different the second time. That one is called the White House that we still have today. There's a very interesting story that comes out of this. So James Madison is the president. If you remember, he was the Secretary of State under Thomas Jefferson. He wins in 1808. He is the president when this throughout the duration of this war. James Madison is out doing president stuff, obviously. He's not actually at the White House when this happens. His wife, however, Dolly Madison is. So, and it's not like they're not coming in here to kill everybody. The British aren't. I mean, there's still rules to war, much more so than present day. So they just want to burn down an empty building. All right. So they'll show up and say, everybody get out. We're burning this down. So get out of here. So Dolly Madison is being forced to evacuate the president's mansion, the wife of the president, the first lady. And very famously, and it is worth to give her credit for this. She's a wealthy woman, has a bunch of bags, everything running out. And when she's leaving the president's mansion, looks up on the wall and sees this painting of George Washington. Now, George Washington has died at this point. George Washington died about 3 years after he left office of natural causes. This is the only painting of him while he was president, all right? And it was hanging in the president's mansion. Dolly Madison gets credit in history for dropping all of her bags and using all of her helpers to go get this painting out of the president's mansion, and that's what she took with her. They burned the president's mansion down. All of her stuff gets burned, but she saved this painting that's not replaceable. This painting today is in the current White House. And Dolly Madison, had she not done this, we would not have had a painting of George Washington while he was the president, like one that he stood for, like a portrait that he was there for. So America's getting the absolute snot beat out of us. I mean, and England's like, are y'all crying, uncle, or are y'all quitting? America's like, no! And a lot of people start getting a little concerned about the fact that, what are we doing? But before we get there, this is the question. Explain why America declared war on England in 1812 and why it was a much different experience for America than the Revolutionary War. Why was this going very different than what happened in the Revolutionary War? So we talked about that. Pause me. We're moving on. So, while America's getting the crap beat out of it, I want to show you this map right here. This was the election, right, of 1808. The last presidential election that they had prior to all this stuff taking place. You can see James Madison here, if you can tell by this key that I'm clearly in the way of. That Madison is in green, Pinckney's in the pink. Those are the two that you need to worry about, all right? And so Madison, that's James Madison. That's the Democratic Republican. That's the guy that's like Jefferson who wins well. And you see that all the southern states, all the agriculture states are big fans of being a Democratic Republican, all right? Being fans of James Madison. The pinkish, orangish states at the top, those are people who voted for Pinckney. Pinckney was a Federalist, right? Because remember, George Washington was a Federalist, John Adams was a Federalist. Well, they haven't been in power since Thomas Jefferson had taken over 10 years prior. So, if you notice, all these states here at the top are collectively referred to as the New England states. They are terrified that America is going to lose this war and all of a sudden England is going to own America again. And they, meaning the Federalists, the people that are in the North, that do not support the fact that we declared war on England because they think it's stupid because clearly it's not going well. So all the Federalists in these states that are disagreeing with this war, they all meet in Connecticut, all right, and a place called Hartford, and it's called the Hartford Convention, all right. The Hartford Convention, so all these Federalists get together, and what they do is they declare their independence from America. They secede from America, all right. They say, we are no longer part of America. The reason they do this is because if they're not part of America and England takes over America, the New England area is not part of America. You can't take them over. So all the Federalists say, America, you suck. We're separate from you. And everybody signs this thing, all right, at the Hartford Convention is what it's called, that America sucks and we want to be separate. Signed all the Federalists, folded up, and they put it in the mail and mail it down to Washington, D.C. Well, Washington, D.C. is on fire. So this letter doesn't make it there for a really long time. All right. So it's a very important story because the war continues to go on and it's not going well for America at all. So much so that America sends some delegates to England and say, hey, England, we don't really want to fight anymore. Like, will you stop kicking us in the face? And England's like, dude, the only reason that we're fighting you is you declared war on us. And we're like, we'll stop if you stop. And England's like, yeah, it's just really expensive. There's no reason for us to keep fighting. So they sign a treaty, and it's called the Treaty of Ghent. And this is them here, America and England shaking hands. All right, the war's officially over, everybody. Hooray. Like, England's like, I'm not trying to take y'all over. Y'all are crazy. Why would we want to take you over? So everybody's like, hooray, that's fantastic. Now, it's going to take about 3 or 4 weeks for that information that the war is over to actually reach the people that are fighting. All right? So there's a very pivotal city in America we've talked quite a bit this unit about, New Orleans. New Orleans had been taken over by the British. America means they don't have access to the Mississippi River. At the very end of this war, there's this guy named Andrew Jackson. He is a head general in the United States military. He leads a charge into New Orleans with American soldiers to recapture New Orleans for America. He successfully does so. It's the only battle America wins the entire war. He charges into New Orleans. It is a very clear-cut victory for the Americans. It's awesome. Hooray, America now controls New Orleans. So this is a painting of Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. This is a random painting of taking back New Orleans. Not a great painting. And when he takes over New Orleans, all right, everybody's excited, and then a letter shows up saying the war is over. Technically, the war had been over for 2 weeks, and nobody knew it, but America, without knowing the war was over, and the British didn't know the war was over, the only battle America wins in the War of 1812 is resecuring New Orleans. All right? And then as soon as we do, the British get on boats, and they go home because the war is over. Everybody's like, whew, war is over. Well, remember that thing called the Hartford Convention? Everybody's like, let's go check our mail. And people go open up their mail, and everybody is super excited and pro-America. Woo, America! What? Why is that? Well, the reason everybody's super pro-America is in our minds, because America is kind of weird, we won the last battle, and then England stopped fighting and went home. Pretty sure we won this war. Everything's on fire. Like, America 100% believes that we won this war. It lasted 3 years, 1812 to 1815. And everybody's like, woo, America! And everybody's like, high five, how great we are. We think we beat England for a second time. Like, truly, that's what we believe. Then they open up their mail and like, ooh, we got something from Hartford. Let's see what the Federalists had to say. Probably congratulations. They sent this like the year before, and open up and it says, America, you suck. We don't want to have anything to do with you. Signed, all the Federalists. Well, everybody loves America at the time. When you say America sucks, you're not very popular. And because of that, the Hartford Convention, where the Federalists met and talked trash to America, is going to end the Federalist Party. Because now all they will ever be known as is the people who were anti-America in the middle of a war. And the Hartford Convention, while they were trying to save themselves, completely ends the Federalist Party during the War of 1812. So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So after, and it's kind of hard to explain, honestly, after the War of 1812, there's this time period called the Era of Good Feelings. America fully believes we just beat England again. This is equivalent to if you're playing a football game and you're getting beat, and it's a home football game at your school, and you're getting beat 70-0, and then the last play of the game, you throw a deep touchdown pass, your guy catches it, the time expires, and the final score is 70-6, and the other team's getting on their bus and going home, and you start thinking, wait a minute, we scored last, and they didn't want to play anymore, and look at them leave. You know what? We won, and like everybody's like, "Woo, we won!" Everybody's like celebrating in your home field, and then like the people leave on the bus is like, "What is wrong with them?" This is how England kind of views America after this. Like, we just beat the snot. You didn't win. America's like, "Yeah, we did." America likes to pretend we are undefeated in wars. We win about half of them, and this is a perfect example. Even if we lose, we think we won. So the Federalists are gone after the War of 1812, which ends in 1815. So it's really just the Democratic Republicans. Like, there's no vicious political fighting. There's no wars. America feels like we're the greatest country on earth. And everybody more or less is getting along from 1815 to 1825. So the question here is, why did the Americans view the War of 1812 as a victory for the United States after the Battle of New Orleans, which therefore leads to the era of good feelings? So answer that. And from 1815 to 1825, America is going good. And you're like, okay, well, 1825. What happens in 1825, Mr. Wagstaff? That's our next unit. All right. See you guys later.